Hello and welcome to this Chess Secrets video, and today I will do a second episode on chess tactics and pattern recognition, which is one of the secrets that allow chess masters to play at such a high level compared to the average person. They just learn more chess tactics and, well, maybe not more tactics, but they learn more patterns and recognize those patterns. So they just gain a higher level and understanding of combinations and tactics involved in those combinations and the patterns involved. All right, so let's jump in here with a few chess tactics and patterns. So here it's white to move. So what would you do to win this game as white? So this shouldn't be too difficult. Just have a look here and pause the video if you need to look longer. But I'll go ahead and turn on the evaluation and the line. So white is winning. And of course there is a mate in one here. So queen to d8. So the pattern to remember here is a back rank checkmate. So anytime the king is behind pieces or pawns and there's no way to guard this back rank and there's no way for the king to escape because his own pieces block him in, then you should look for this pattern emerging here where a check delivered on the back rank by a rook or a queen may deliver mate, as it is in this case here. All right, so now we'll look at a second example and keep this pattern in mind here, and we'll build off of that. Excuse me. All right, so let's see here. This next example now, after having seen the pattern, the back rank mate pattern in that first example, that should help you in solving this. So once again, it's white to move. How does white win this game here? So take a look and pause the video if you need to. If not, I will turn on the evaluation and we'll take a look at the answer here. All right, so white is winning, and of course it is a sacrifice of this rook here. Well, not really a sacrifice, a trade for that knight. The king will recapture, and then we have that mate, the back rank mate, once again on d8 there. So just quick look at that from the beginning. So knight capture, or rook captures the knight, which was protecting and defending that back rank. But after the capture, which was forced, we have a mate. Okay, so now we'll build on this a little further. Turn off the lines and evaluation and look at the next example here. All right, so now how do we play in this position as white to move? So how can white gain the advantage? So now it's a little trickier, and this would be more difficult if you saw this position in a game, but after having seen the previous two examples, that should help you solve this. So once again, pause the video if you need more time. If not, let's continue here. So white is winning, and here the best move, a mate in 3, begins with knight to h6 here. So if the king would move out of this check by the knight, he would have to move to h8, but then it would just be a back rank mate with the rook capturing the knight. So this forces the queen to capture here, and then we have the previous position, capture with check, forcing the king to recapture, and the queen delivers that back rank mate. All right, I hope you got all of that so far, And now we'll move on to one final example building off of all those previous moves. Okay, so here we go. Once again, white in this position. How should the game be played? And by now you should be able to figure this out, hopefully, and solve this mate in 4. All right, pause once again if you need more time to think about it, but let's check out the answer. White is winning, of course, with rook to e8. So that's kind of an obvious move. And then once again, the knight blocks here, cutting off this rook's attack. But now we have check with the knight. The queen is forced to capture. The rook captures, pulling the king over, but this mating pattern once again of queen checkmating on the back rank and also cutting off this e7 escape. All right, well, let's move on to another example here. We'll start over with a different mating pattern. All right, let's see here. Okay, in this position, it is white's turn to move. And what does white do here? How can white win the game in this position? Okay, check this out. Hopefully you found the answer fairly quickly, and pause the video if you do need more time to look at the position. But here we go. All right, white is winning, and of course, the fastest win is bishop to e4 mate here. So that would be the quickest way to win this position. All right, now keeping this in mind, here we see the bishops working together, cutting off all these squares around the king, and a bishop pair lining up on both of these diagonals against the king side can be a common occurrence. So just remember this pattern if you ever have bishops, and they may not be this close to the king. They could be over on the queen side, firing up the diagonals toward the opponent's king. And especially with this rook helping, that can be very dangerous, as we see here. All right, on to the next example. And we will build off of what we have seen so far. All right. Okay. So now, after having seen that previous position, hopefully you can figure this one out. So what is white's best move in this position? All right. Pause if you need more time. If not, let's take a look. All right. And the winning move is pawn captures on g6. And here there are two options. So one option would be for the king to retreat up here to g8. And then we would see a common mating pattern with a bishop attacking up the long diagonal and the rook on the h-file delivering check on h8. So this is a famous, commonly occurring mating pattern to remember here, where the bishop controls this diagonal and the rook is able to attack up the h-file, delivering check on h8 while being protected by this bishop. Now, another option after pawn captures on g6 would be for the king to capture here. But then we would have the e4 mate there with the bishop. Okay, now that you have seen that, let's move on and build off of that pattern. All right, so part 7 here, or example 7. All right, so what does white do in this position to begin this mating attack? All right, take a look at it. And if you need more time, like always, pause the video. If not, let us continue. All right. A queen sacrifice. Queen captures on h7, delivering check. And the king is forced to capture. And then we just continue. Pawn captures. If the king captures, then we have bishop to e4 delivering mate. All right, we'll do one final example building off of that, and hopefully you'll find the winning move. All right. Okay, so here we are in this similar position. And now, what does white do to win here? How should white begin? All right. Pause once again if you have to. If not, let's see. White is winning. And the best move in this position is queen to h6. Okay, now what does this move do? Well, it threatens another common mating pattern of using a bishop or a pawn here to control this g7 square and use the queen to move in there and deliver a mate. So we have a threat of mate in one with queen to g7 mate. And so the queen must move here to fight for this diagonal and guard this g7 square. So in this position, white is winning no matter what, but black could delay with c1 promoting the queen check, but then rook would capture with check. The king could move to h2, then rook to h1, and then here either bishop or king could capture. But now we're back to this same position where there's a threat of mate in one on g7. So this forces the queen to fight for this diagonal. But now the queen instead sacrifices. And then the king is forced to capture. And then we have a double check here. The pawn captures with check, but also this discovered check by the rook. And so here, once again, we have that option of the king moving to g8, and then the rook would mate on h8, or the king capturing and the bishop delivering mate here with the rook and two bishops. All right, well, I hope you were able to solve those tactical patterns and problems with no issues. And if you had trouble, go back over them and check them out. But hopefully you can remember those patterns. You don't have to memorize where all the pieces are. Just try and remember those patterns, and you may be able to use them in your own games. Before we go on, I have one final example here that was kind of interesting, so we'll check that out. Let's see here. Okay, well, hopefully you didn't see all the answers there. All right, in this position, it's white's turn to move. And what is the best move for white in this position? So if you were playing with white, what would you do? All right, let's see. Once again, pause the video if you need more time to think. If not, we'll take a look. All right. So now we have white winning in this position, and it looks like queen captures the knight on g8 is the best move. So what this does by the queen capturing here on g8 is it removes a defender. A important tactic to remember. If you have a good move that's possible, like here the knight is threatening to move up to knight to f6, forking the queen and the king. but that knight was defending. So white removes the defender, and now the computer shows the best move is to just capture this knight, but that would allow a rook capture. So before we get into that, I'll see what would probably be more common is maybe this capture, but this would allow the fork by the knight here. So the defender, which was that knight on g8, has been removed, allowing the knight to fork the king, the queen, and now the rook as well. So the king is forced to move down to e7. But now this allows the knight to capture with check, forcing this king back up to e8. And now the knight just checks the king again, forking the king and queen. So the king is forced to move, but now the knight may capture the queen. And then the game may continue with bishop captures, but then we have a check, and if the pawn tries to block, well then the bishop could just capture and drive this king back up to e8 anyway, so black immediately moves to e8. But then we have knight captures and king captures, which basically decoys the king away from trying to help defend this pawn, but it doesn't matter anyway because we have two pieces attacking. So the game may continue with a rook capture, and now white is just ahead in this position and should win. The other rook can move on to this open file. This pawn is under attack. If the rook's doubled up, the bishop would be under attack. So white should be winning. And the other possibility, if we go back to the beginning, after removing the defender by capturing that knight on g8, another possibility may have been to capture the knight instead. Well then, that would allow the queen to capture the rook, and then the pawn could capture this other bishop. But now we have bishop to h6. And so in this case, white with this queen has pinned this bishop to the king. And this is an absolute pin, as this bishop cannot move. It would be illegal because that would put the king in check. So this bishop cannot move. And now pressure has been placed on the pinned piece. So anytime you're able to pin a piece, it can often be good to add more pressure to the pinned piece. So the bishop jumps in, adding more pressure to this pinned bishop, and the queen is forced to defend here. And now we have rook moving in, lining up on the queen and king. Even though this piece is in between this pawn, it is often a good idea to line up your rooks on the king or the queen or both, especially if they are lined up like this with the queen in front of the king. So black may develop a piece here and give the king more room, and also try and cover this e5 square if this pawn tries to push forward and open the position up on the king and queen here. So e5 is played to try and break open the position. The pawn is pushed forward to help try and prevent any opening of this line on the king and queen. But then e6 is played, and so the bishop captures. But now the rook gives itself up for the bishop here, and after the queen captures, now we would have a capture here, and this is a skewer. So once the queen was able to go here, it skewers the king and rook, and this is kind of the opposite of a pin. So in a pin, the weaker piece is in front of a more valuable piece. A skewer is the opposite, where a more valuable piece is in front of a less valuable piece. And then once it moves away, you're able to capture that piece behind there. And so the game may continue like this, but in this position, white is ahead and should be able to win this game, and especially with black's king in the open like this. All right, so if we go back and just take a quick look at that again, so piling up on the pinned piece, the queen helps to defend, the rook lines up on the king and queen, the knight moves in to help defend the center, and then after trying to break the center open, the pawn pushes forward. And then here, let's see, the pawn moves forward. And I was wondering, what would happen if the pawn were to capture? Well, it looks like that would be a pretty bad move, because then we could have the bishop capturing here, and the queen is under attack, the rook is helping to attack. So anyway, that's an interesting little, sideline, but it looks like that is even worse for black. All right, well, I'll end the video there on chess tactics and pattern recognition. Just a little secret that chess masters use and good chess players, learning these patterns and recognizing them in games. And the more of these patterns you can just go over while you're practicing your tactics, learn these patterns and become familiar with them, then it'll help you in games to see checkmates easier, to see little attacking patterns, and to be able to use them to help win your games. All right, well, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave comments or suggestions, and have a great day, everybody.